My name is Priya Sharma. I am 26 years old. I'm a city health inspector, and I found out my sister had been trying to get my food truck shut down on the same week I got the badge that made me the person who does the shutting down. She didn't know that part yet. That's the whole story, really. My sister Anjali is 3 years older than me, and she runs a small catering company that she is very proud of, and that is, by every honest measure, struggling. For the last year I'd been running a food truck on the weekends, just me, a used truck, my grandmother's recipes, parked outside the Saturday market. It started as a side thing while I finished my public health certification. And it did well. Too well, from Anjali's point of view. Lines started forming. A local food blog wrote me up. And my sister, who had spent our whole lives being the one with the real food business while I was the kid sister playing restaurant, did not take it well. I should explain the truck, because it mattered more to me than a side hustle. I started it the summer I began my certification, half to pay for the program and half because I missed my grandmother and cooking her food was the closest I could get to her. I bought a beat-up truck at auction and spent 2 months fixing it up myself, and I ran it out of the lot beside the Saturday farmers market, and the first weekend I made $11 in profit and cried in the front seat, happy. By the end of that first summer there was a line. By the fall it wrapped around the lot. People came for my grandmother's spice blends, the ones Anjali's catering menu never quite got right, and they came back, and they brought friends. It was the first thing in my life that was entirely, unarguably mine. Not the baby sister's cute hobby, but a thing that worked because I was good at it. I found out how not well on a Sunday morning, when a woman I knew from my certification program texted me. She worked in the permits office, and said, carefully, "Hey, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but someone's filed 3 complaints against your truck this month. Health complaints. Anonymous. Just a heads up to keep your paperwork clean. 3 anonymous health complaints. Against a truck I ran spotlessly, because I was literally studying food safety at the time. I knew immediately they were false. And I knew, the way you know things about your own family, exactly who'd filed them, because there was only one person on earth who both wanted my truck gone and knew the exact language to make a health complaint sound official. I did not call my sister and scream. I have learned that the person who reacts is the person who ends up looking guilty, and I was not going to hand Anjali that. So I said nothing. I kept my truck spotless, which it already was. And I waited. I want to be honest about that waiting, because it wasn't patience, exactly. It was a cold, careful stillness I'd learned from the job. In an inspection, when something is wrong, you don't react and you don't accuse, you document, quietly, completely, and you let the record build until it speaks for itself. So that's what I did with my own life. I kept my logs. I kept my truck immaculate, every temperature recorded, every surface clean, not because I was worried, I knew I was clean, but because I understood that when my sister's false complaints finally triggered an official inspection, I wanted the record to be so spotless it would do more than clear me. I wanted it to quietly establish that the complaints were baseless, so the pattern of who was filing bad faith reports would start to write itself, without me ever saying a word. Because my sister had made one enormous mistake, and she made it because she still thought of me as the kid sister playing restaurant, too young and too small to be any kind of threat to her. She didn't know that I'd just finished my certification. She didn't know I'd taken a job with the city. She didn't know that as of that very week, the person who would be assigned to inspect food establishments in our district, hers included, was me. Before I tell you what I found when my sister's own catering company came up on my inspection list, and what I chose to do with it, tell me what time it is where you are right now, and whether you've ever been underestimated by your own big sister. I want to see how far this story travels. I have to explain what I do, because it's the whole spine of this story, and it's the exact thing my family never took seriously because I was the youngest. I'm a health inspector. I check that the places you eat aren't going to make you sick. Temperatures, storage, cross-contamination, the boring invisible stuff that stands between a kitchen and an outbreak. It is not a glamorous job. Nobody's impressed at a party when you say you inspect walk-in coolers for a living. But it is built entirely on one principle that turned out to matter more than anything in my life. The record is the truth. Either the cooler was at the right temperature or it wasn't. Either the log was filled out or it wasn't. You cannot charm your way past a thermometer, and you cannot cry your way out of a violation. The facts sit there, cold and patient, and they don't care who your family is. I learned that in my very first month of training, shadowing a senior inspector at a restaurant everyone in town loved, a beautiful place, warm lighting, glowing reviews. And the walk-in cooler was 4 degrees too warm, and had been, quietly, for who knows how long. The owner was charming and mortified and swore it had never happened before, and none of that mattered, because the thermometer didn't care how charming he was. We shut the cooler until he fixed it. And I stood in that gleaming kitchen understanding, for the first time, that my whole job was going to be about the gap between how something looks and how safe it actually is. That gap is where people get hurt. That gap is also, it turned out, the exact gap my own family lived in. People are often surprised, when I show up, that the inspector is a woman in her 20s. They expect someone older, someone official looking, and instead they get me, and I watch them relax a little, like this one will be easy. It never occurs to them that being underestimated is the one advantage an inspector actually wants. People show you their real kitchen when they think you're too young to notice. I had spent my whole life being underestimated by my family. It turned out to be excellent training for a job where the entire point is to see clearly the thing people are counting on you to miss. My family found this hilarious in the gentle way they found most things about me. I was the baby, the afterthought, the one who was still figuring it out while Anjali had a real business. My mother introduced Anjali as my daughter, the caterer and me as, and this is Priya, she's still in school. At family dinners, when I tried to talk about food safety, which I found genuinely fascinating, someone would make a joke about me being the food police, and everyone would laugh, and I'd laugh too, because that was the price of a seat at the grown-ups table. Anjali leaned into it hardest, because she needed the gap between us. She was the one with the catering company. I was the one with the cute little truck. She'd say it at family gatherings, warmly, with a laugh, Priya's playing restaurant again, and everyone would smile, and I'd smile, and only I knew that the cute little truck was outselling her real business 3 Saturdays out of 4. I want to be fair, because fairness is the whole point of this story. Anjali wasn't born cruel. She was the older sister who'd been handed a role, the accomplished one, the one with the business, before she'd actually built anything solid under it, and then she watched her baby sister quietly do the thing she was supposed to be the expert at, better than she did. That's a specific kind of terror, and she reached for the specific kind of weapon that was in front of her. She tried to make the health system erase the competition, never once imagining that the baby sister she was reporting was about to become the health system. Because here is the thing about the food, the part that made it personal, the recipes weren't mine, exactly. They were our grandmother's. She'd come to this country with almost nothing and a head full of recipes, and she'd cooked her way through raising a family, and at the end of her life, of all the grandchildren, she handed the recipe box to me. Not to Anjali, the one with the catering business, to me, the baby, the one still in school. I think Anjali never forgave either of us for that. In her mind, the recipes should have been hers, she was the one who cooked professionally. But our grandmother had watched us both in her kitchen for years, and she'd made her choice, and her choice was the granddaughter who asked how things worked over the granddaughter who wanted to be seen cooking. When my truck took off using those recipes, it wasn't just competition for Anjali. It was proof, parked outside the market every Saturday, of a verdict our grandmother had passed that Anjali couldn't stand. There were 3 moments I never let myself feel until that week made me feel all of them at once. When I was 19 and told the family I wanted to go into public health, Anjali said, at the dinner table, "So you're going to be, what, the person who finds restaurants like mine?" and laughed, and my mother said I'd find my path eventually. When I was 23 and my grandmother, the one whose recipes I ran, left me her handwritten recipe box in her will, Anjali actually asked our mother why the recipes hadn't gone to the one with the actual food business. And when I started the truck last year and it took off, Anjali stopped coming to family dinners when she knew I'd be there, and told our mother it was because I'd gotten arrogant, which was the family word for a younger sibling who'd stopped staying small. Each one was warm on the surface. That was the trap of it. Each one told me exactly where I was supposed to stay, which was beneath her, and I'd stayed there for years because rocking the boat was ungracious and Anjali was fragile about her business and I was the easygoing one who didn't need things. Then I got my certification, and I got the badge, and the ground quietly shifted under both of us before either of us said a word about it. Here is what happened, in order, because the order matters. I finished my certification and took the city job. I did not announce it at a family dinner, partly because my family didn't really track my career and partly because I was still the kid sister and it didn't occur to me anyone would care. So Anjali had no idea. In her mind I was still just the truck. Around the same time, her anonymous complaints landed. My friend in the permits office tipped me off. And here's the thing that turned a family sadness into a genuine reckoning. I didn't have to do anything shady to deal with them, because the complaints were investigated by the department, my new department, and the inspection of my truck came back spotless. Because it was spotless, because I was a food safety professional running it. The false complaints didn't hurt me. They just sat in a file, 3 anonymous reports that an actual inspection had proven baseless, quietly establishing a pattern of someone filing bad faith complaints. I remember the day my truck's inspection came back clean, standing in the lot holding the report, feeling 2 things at once. Relief, obviously. But also a strange, sad clarity, because the clean report meant the thing I had been avoiding, my sister really had done it. There was no innocent explanation left. Somebody who knew the exact language of a health complaint had filed 3 of them against a truck they knew was spotless, purely to make it disappear. And there was exactly 1 person alive who fit that description. Reading my own clean report was the moment I stopped being able to tell myself I might be wrong about her. I could have let it end there. My truck was cleared. But then, a few weeks into the job, the routine inspection assignments for our district came across my desk, and there it was on the list, in plain type, my sister's catering company. Assigned to me. Now, I want to be scrupulous here, because this is the moral center of the whole thing. The correct, professional move was exactly what I did. I disclosed the conflict immediately. I went to my supervisor and I said, "This business belongs to my sister, I can't be the inspector of record, please reassign it." That is what integrity requires, and it's the thing my sister would never have done in my place, and it's the thing that ended up protecting me completely. Because I recused myself, in writing, on day 1, nobody could ever say I'd used my badge against her. I want to sit on that, because it's the hinge of everything and the opposite of what my sister would have done. The easy, ugly move was right there, keep the assignment, inspect her myself, and either bury what I found to look generous or wield it to finally win. Both would have been catastrophic, not just ethically but practically, because the moment anyone learned I had inspected my own sister, every finding would have been tainted and my career would have been the thing that ended, not hers. Disclosing the conflict wasn't just the honest move. It was the only move that kept my hands clean enough that the truth, when it came out, would belong to the facts and not to me. My whole profession is built on the idea that the inspector cannot have a stake in the outcome. I had the biggest possible stake. So I stepped away, in writing, immediately, and that single boring act of integrity is why I get to tell this story as someone who did nothing wrong. So a different inspector took Anjali's catering company. And that inspector, who had no idea Anjali was anyone's sister, did a completely routine inspection. And it was bad. I want to be careful how I say this, because I didn't see the report as her sister. I saw it the way anyone in my department would see any inspection, after the fact, as a matter of record. But the facts were the facts. Anjali's catering operation, the real business, the one she'd spent years holding over me, had serious violations. Not paperwork nitpicks. The real kind. Temperature control on foods that can make people genuinely sick. Storage that risked cross-contamination. The invisible stuff that doesn't show up in a pretty Instagram photo of a catering spread but absolutely shows up when someone gets food poisoning at a wedding. And that's what scared me, honestly, more than it satisfied me. Because I wasn't looking at a paperwork problem. I was looking at the kind of violations that end with a family sick after a christening, or an elderly relative in the hospital after a wedding, or a child. The invisible failures in a kitchen aren't abstract to a health inspector. We're trained on exactly what they become. I looked at my sister's report and I didn't see a way to win. I saw people who didn't know they were eating food that had been handled unsafely, trusting a caterer who was in over her head and too proud to admit it. My sister had spent a month trying to weaponize a system built to protect people against a truck that was protecting them perfectly, while the actual danger sat in her own walk-in. My sister had spent a month filing false health complaints against my spotless truck. And her own kitchen, the real one, was the one actually putting people at risk. The irony was so complete it didn't even feel satisfying. It felt sad. Because underneath the years of her making me small, Anjali wasn't a villain running a dirty kitchen on purpose. She was a woman drowning in a business she'd never quite had the training to run, cutting corners she didn't fully understand were dangerous, performing successful caterer so hard that she'd never stopped to learn the boring safety fundamentals that her kid sister had gone and gotten certified in. She reported me to shut down my truck. Her own kitchen was the one a single bad inspection away from shutting itself down. Here is where the story becomes a choice, and it is not the choice my family expected, and it is probably not the one you'd expect either. Because I had it all, if I wanted it. I knew about the violations. I knew about the false complaints she'd filed against me, 3 of them, now provably bad faith, sitting in a file. I could have made sure the enforcement came down on her as hard as the rules allowed. I could have let her business get formally cited, fined, publicly posted on the city's violation database where every client checks. I could have leaned, quietly and deniably, on the process, and watched the real business she'd used to shrink me for years collapse under the weight of her own cut corners. There would have been a perfect symmetry in it. She tried to use the health department to destroy my food business, and the health department destroys hers instead. I thought about it. On the drive home the day I saw that report, I thought about it a great deal, because 26 years of being the kid sister playing restaurant had built up more anger than I'd admitted to myself. But I kept asking what I actually wanted underneath it, and it wasn't my sister's ruin. It was to not be small anymore. And I already had that. The moment I got that badge, I had it, whether she ever knew or not. Destroying Anjali wouldn't make me bigger. It would just make me the villain in the story, and it would put her catering staff out of work, and it would humiliate my family, and none of that was the thing I actually needed. The craving to watch her business burn and the need to stop being belittled were 2 different things, and I was old enough, even at 26, to tell them apart. My grandmother helped me see it, in a way, even though she was gone. Because I kept thinking about what she'd actually valued, not winning, not being the best, but taking care. She cooked to take care of people. She handed me the recipes because she trusted me to take care of them. And the whole reason I'd gone into food safety in the first place was that same instinct, to keep people from getting hurt by the invisible things. If I used my knowledge to destroy my sister, I'd be betraying the exact thing that had made my grandmother choose me. The recipes and the badge came from the same place. I wasn't going to turn one of them into a weapon. So I did the thing my grandmother would have recognized, the thing that used what I knew not to destroy but to fix. I did not touch the enforcement. It ran its normal course, handled by the other inspector, entirely without my thumb on the scale. Anjali's business was cited. That was going to happen no matter what I did, because the violations were real and people's safety was involved, and I would never, ever bury a genuine food safety risk to protect a family member. That's the one line the job does not let you cross. But the citation came with a correction period, a chance to fix the problems and pass a re-inspection, which is how the system is designed to work. And that's where I did the one thing I chose to do. I went to my sister, not as an inspector, I made that boundary very clear, but as her sister, and I offered to help her fix it. For free. On my own time. I offered to walk her through every violation, teach her the temperature logs, the storage protocols, the fundamentals, the exact boring invaluable things I'd spent 2 years learning that she'd never had anyone to teach her. She did not take it well, at first. Of course she didn't. When I showed up at her kitchen with my offer, she was humiliated and furious, and she assumed the worst, that I'd engineered the whole thing, that I'd used my badge to sabotage her, that the kid sister had finally found a way to win. She said, "You did this. You reported me. This is you getting back at me for the truck." And I said the sentence I'd say again exactly the same way. I said, "Anjali, I didn't inspect you. I recused myself the day I saw your name in writing, because you're my sister. Someone else found these problems, and they were real, and they were putting people at risk. I'm not here to shut you down. I'm the only person in this family who actually knows how to help you not get shut down." And she said, "How did you even?" and stopped, because she was doing the thing a person does when they realize the ground has moved. She was realizing I had a certification. A city job. That the kid sister playing restaurant was, in actual fact, a food safety professional, and had been for weeks, while she was busy filing anonymous complaints about a truck that was cleaner than her own kitchen. I didn't say the thing I could have said. I didn't mention the 3 complaints. I just let her understand, without my having to spell it out, that I knew exactly what she'd tried to do, and that I was standing in her kitchen offering to help her anyway. That silence did more than any accusation could have. She started to cry, and it wasn't performance, and she said, "I've been so scared of that business for 2 years. I don't know what I'm doing. I never did." And there it was, the truth under all of it. My sister hadn't been belittling me because I was small. She'd been belittling me because I was good at the thing she was terrified she was failing at. And I understood, standing in her kitchen while she cried, that the whole architecture of our relationship had been upside down. All those years I thought Anjali looked down on me because I was small and she was accomplished. It was the reverse. She needed me small precisely because some part of her had always known I was the one who actually understood food, that our grandmother had seen it, that the recipes had proven it, that my truck had proven it again. Keeping me the baby sister playing restaurant wasn't contempt. It was defense. As long as I was the kid, she never had to face that her little sister had quietly become the professional she had only ever performed being. The 18 months after that were not dramatic. That's the part these stories never show. I helped her fix the kitchen. It took weeks. I taught her the logs, the temperatures, the storage, the whole unglamorous backbone of running food safely, and she passed her re-inspection cleanly, and, this is the part one didn't expect, her business actually got better, because for the first time it was built on something solid instead of performance. It turns out customers can feel the difference between a caterer who's winging it and one who knows what she's doing, even if they can't name it. Anjali stopped being terrified of her own kitchen. And a person who isn't terrified runs a much better business. I watched it happen over those weeks. The first re-inspection she failed on one small thing and cried in the walk-in, and I sat on an upside-down bucket with her and we did it again. The second time she passed, and she called me before she called her own husband. Bookings she'd been quietly losing started coming back, because a caterer who knows her cold-holding temperatures is a caterer who stops having the little disasters that make clients not rebook. She hired a second person. She raised her prices, because for the first time she believed she was worth them. None of that was me. I just handed her the boring knowledge she'd been too proud, and too scared, to ask for. She never filed another complaint, obviously. But more than that, she stopped needing to. The thing that had driven her to report her own sister was the fear that I was going to expose her as a fraud, and once I'd stood in her kitchen and helped her instead of exposing her, that fear had nothing left to feed on. There was one evening, a few weeks into helping her, that I keep coming back to. We were in her kitchen at 11 at night, both of us exhausted, going through her cold storage setup for the third time, and she suddenly laughed, a real laugh, not a performing one, and said, "Grandma would think this was hilarious. Me, taking food safety lessons from you." And I said, "Grandma would think it was about time." And Anjali went quiet, and then she said, "She gave you the recipes because she knew, didn't she? She knew you were the careful one." And I didn't answer, because it was true and it didn't need confirming. For the first time in our lives, my sister wasn't competing with me. She was just standing in her kitchen at 11 at night, learning something from her little sister, and letting it be okay that she needed to. My mother took the longest to understand what had happened, because she'd spent 26 years with a fixed idea of her two daughters, the accomplished older one and the baby still figuring it out. When she finally understood that the baby was a city professional who'd quietly saved the older one's business, she didn't quite know what to do with it. One Sunday she said, "I've been introducing you wrong for years, haven't I, still in school?" And I said it was okay. And she said, "It's not, really. You were the one who knew what you were doing the whole time." It wasn't a grand apology. But it was my mother finally seeing me, and I decided to let it be enough. And Anjali and I are, strangely, closer than we've ever been, not because she apologized in a clean sentence, but because I know the truth about her business and she knows I chose to protect her with it instead of using it, and there's a particular kind of trust that only exists between two people when one of them had every reason to destroy the other and simply didn't. People ask me whether it was revenge. I didn't file a false complaint. I didn't abuse a badge. I didn't inspect my own sister or bury a real risk or engineer anyone's downfall. I didn't do a single one of the things the setup seems to promise. Anjali did the reporting, her own cut corners did the rest, and the system did exactly what it's built to do, entirely without me. All I did was refuse to use what I knew as a weapon, and use it as a repair instead. The badge that could have destroyed her became the thing that saved her, because I'd rather be the person who knows how to fix a kitchen than the person who knows how to close one. Here is what everybody lost. Anjali lost the story, the one where she was the real caterer and I was the kid playing restaurant. She lost it the day she found out the kid was the professional. But she gained a business that actually works and a sister she no longer has to fear, which is a better trade than she knows. My mother lost the tidy version of her daughters, and she's the only one still quietly, honestly adjusting to who we actually turned out to be. And I lost something too, and it wasn't my sister. I lost the belief that if I just stayed small enough, and easygoing enough, and let Anjali be the accomplished one long enough, my family would eventually notice I'd grown up. They never noticed on their own. It took a badge, and a report I didn't file, and a choice not to use what I held, before anyone in my family finally saw that the baby had become someone who knew exactly what she was doing. I think a lot now about how close I came to the other choice, the one where I let the enforcement crush her, where I mentioned the 3 complaints, where I finally got to be the one who won. It would have felt good for about a week. And then I would have been a health inspector who used the job to settle a family score, and a sister who chose being right over being kind, and I would have lost the one thing my grandmother actually gave me, which was never the recipes or even the skill. It was the instinct to take care of people, especially the ones who can't see that they need it. My sister couldn't see that she needed help. That's exactly why helping her was the only thing worth doing. I keep my grandmother's recipe box on the counter of my truck now. Not my certification, that's framed at home. The recipe box. Because that little wooden box is the truest thing anyone ever handed me, the reason I loved food enough to learn how to keep it safe, from a woman who trusted the youngest grandchild with the family's recipes precisely because she knew I'd treat them with care. They thought I was the kid sister playing restaurant. It turned out the kid sister was the one who actually knew how to keep the food from making anyone sick, including at the real business that spent years looking down on her. So if there's someone in your life who keeps you small because they're terrified you're better than them at the one thing they built their whole identity on, ask yourself one thing tonight. Are you actually the little one? Or have you quietly become the exact person they should have been asking for help all along? Thank you for staying with this story to the end. Every character and event in it is fictional, written for reflection and entertainment. But if any of it felt familiar, I hope it leaves you with this: the person your family decided was the baby, the one still figuring it out, is sometimes the one who quietly went and learned to do the hard thing for real. Being underestimated isn't the insult it feels like. It's cover. It's the room they give you to become something they never saw coming, and then, if you're kind, to turn around and help the very people who couldn't see you at all.